everyone, my name is Bailey and welcome to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to be starting a brand new series. In this series, I'm going to be teaching you basic art skills while also teaching you basic human skills. What are basic human skills, you ask? Basic human skills, or common decency, are necessary skills you need to have as a functioning member of society.
Will we elaborate on that?
No.
Look, if you live in America like me, basic human skills just don't exist anymore. Our individualism and rage bait media has corrupted a large part of society, and it's had a strong negative effect on how we treat each other. Not only that, but our need to be the ones on top and the endless greed of those in charge of us has killed most people's access to art, interest in it, and even their desire to make it. Creating art is such an integral, ancient part of the human experience. It is a great way to express emotions. It is easily accessible to anyone. There's so many different kinds of forms of art. It influences our day-to-day life. It is as endless as our imaginations. And most modern things we have today are thanks to artists. The lack of respect for art in today's infrastructure and media makes everything seem so bland and fake. Honestly, as an artist, it is annoying and so disheartening. I don't know if this is true for the whole world, as I just live in America. Art is something I have spent my whole life obsessed over. So it is pretty upsetting that the world decided to stop caring about it as soon as I got old enough to participate. Anyways, that's why I decided to create this series, which I'm calling Basics with Bailey, where hopefully your eyes are open and your ears are listening and your mouth is closed, and maybe, just maybe, I could teach you a thing or two about art and being a better person. In today's video, I want to start at the very beginning, ground zero, level 0. In art, we call these foundational skills, and I'll be using these to help explain some self-reflection techniques that are needed to be a functioning member of society. Today, the two basic skills we will be going over are observational skills and line work. We're going to use these art skills to help you be more aware of yourself and how you interact with the world. Let's get into it. One of the first things I learned in art school is how to use your eyes like an artist. How to see what is truly in front of our eyes instead of what we want to see or what our brain thinks we see. Our brains are taking in so much information at once, they kind of have to block some of it out. Listen, I'm not a scientist, obviously. I'm just an artist. Your brain is silly. Our memory is even worse because our brain will also just make things up. Even cameras aren't 100% accurate. They actually do distort things slightly, especially modern day cameras, because they have a lot of like balancing features. Again, I'm an artist, but they're a little more reliable than, say, your brain. Today, for simplicity's sake, we are going to be working from photos, but the best way to practice any art skill is to work from real life. Having the object in front of you, what you're drawing, is so important to learn these foundational skills that we are about to go over. And while having photos works and is perfectly acceptable, it's just not as good and not as good as doing it in person. Observational skills are so important in art, and learning how to observe objects is the first step. I'm going to switch over to my iPad and show you how to observe objects. So, the first thing you'll be looking for when you are observing your pictures is shapes. Well, basically everyone knows their shapes, right? We learned that at a very young age. It's pretty universal. That's what you're going to look for in your images. Simple shapes. For example, here at this mousse cookie jar is a cylinder with the rounded top, and it would have a rounded bottom, but it is cut off by this rectangular shape. The second shape here is a pyramid-like shape. So you have your 3, 1, 2, and then the third one is in the front here. This next shape here, you think is a very complicated shape, but if you break it down, it's not so hard. So in the middle, you have a very oblong oval. At the bottom, you have a little bit of a trapezoid. And this really complicated shape here is honestly just the same thing, just slightly tilted onto its side. And it has a little bit of a fancy lip, but the basic shape is still a cylinder. Oh yeah, just look at how things are made of simple shapes. You don't even have to do this like I did it, like tracing. You can literally just look at a picture on your phone and do it on a piece of paper and just draw the shapes that you see. I'm just doing it this way for YouTube's sake, so yeah, this definitely can be done with pencil and is a super useful way to start learning foundational skills. Another thing you want to be looking at when you're observing your photos is values and color. So value is basically the lightness or darkness of a color or tone. So for example here, we have the cabinet. So here's where we're going to show the difference in value and tone. So obviously this cabinet is all the same color, but also obviously because of the light in the room, there's a completely different in these two colors. Just let me look at this one on the color wheel so you see. So if we look, actually, this cabinet is green, right? In real life, this cabinet is like a sage green. On the color wheel, this cabinet is yellow. And then if you come down here and grab this color closer to the very bright highlight from the light coming through the window, the highlight is orange. So you see there's very much variation in color in real life when things are the same color. Another example here is the edge of the cabinet, which is in shadow, is going to be a lot darker in value and also be different in color as well. When you're observing your photos, observe the color of the photos, the value of the different colors. Just like in art, the first skill to be a better person is to just observe. And we're not observing the world, we're observing ourselves. Pay attention to how you think. You have an inner dialogue. You have negative self-talk often. What do you think about the most? How do you visualize things in your mind? Do you know what you want, what you don't like? Before even attempting to change anything about yourself, you need to learn yourself. Pay attention to your dreams. Start a dream journal. Start journaling in general. Journaling is a great way to learn about yourself. Be alone with yourself. Be alone with yourself and no entertainment, which means no iPad, no phone. Sit with yourself and just listen to your thoughts. And yes, I know this is kind of a scary thing for a lot of people to not have something constantly entertaining them or taking their attention, but it is very important to do. You will never know yourself or understand how you affect other people until you sit with yourself. Being aware of how you think, how you process things, and how you approach the world is especially necessary if you want to learn to grow. The second foundational skill I want to talk about today is the line. Knowing how to use line work is an important part of expression and intention in art. Line quality refers to the thickness or thinness of a line, and it is important in expressing different things like weight, value, and as an important tool of communication for the artist. Another way to use line that is very helpful for all different kinds of art is something called contour lines. So basically, contour lines are kind of like a step up from what we're doing in our observation, where we break it down to its basic shape. So you would do that first. You would break it down to its basic shape. We're gonna kind of round the bottom of it this time, like pretend like the edge of the cabinet isn't here, just for, teaching's sake. All right, so after you break it down to your basic shape, you're gonna kind of draw out your lines to show the 3D aspect of the object. So what you want to do is follow your edge lines. So for example, when we go this way, we're gonna follow this top edge line. Another thing you can do is where the object is the closest to the viewer or the biggest, you want to have your lines the most spaced out to kind of show that, right? When we get to the middle, you'll have to notice, right, that this line is very different from this line. So what happens is when you get to the middle of like a rounded object like this, it actually looks like a straight line, even though it's not, right? It's rounded. But from your perspective, the line is straight. So you go straight, and then you'll start going to following this bottom line here. So this middle part will be the widest, it's smaller, the closer to the edge. It gives you kind of like a 3D print of your object. That way when you're shading, you can follow these lines. So instead of shading it like straight, you would follow the lines and it would give it a lot more three-dimensionality. So contour lines are very useful for foundational work when making your base sketches. So the last thing that line thickness can do is help you define perspective. So I took a picture of this tree that is kind of growing into our backyard as an example of that. Artists really like to do is break things down to the basics, right? We went to basic shapes and now we're going to do basic numbers. A thing with the background or foreground or anything where you're trying to show depth is you almost, you can break it down into any number you want, but the basic minimum you want to have is 3 planes. We have our 3 planes, right? We have our front leaves right here, which are the closest to us. We have the second set right here, which is in the midground. And then we have these trees kind of in the background further away behind our main tree here. A way to show that this tree branch right here is the closest is to use a thicker line art. And I'm just going to trace out some of these leaves. Okay, so obviously I'm not doing this like to be perfect, it's just to show you. So we have very thick leaves here, right? So I'm going to turn my line art down, and then if you were doing this traditionally, you would just go over these lines over and over, right, until they were thicker than the other lines, and you would start probably with the background to get the thinnest lines, but we're doing it digitally, so we don't have to do that. So next I'm going to do the middle layer, and I've thinned out my line art. Okay. So there is the middle, and then lastly we'll do the background and we'll turn it up really small. That is really small. Maybe a little bigger so we can see. Obviously this is going to be a very crude example. I'm just trying to kind of give you an idea of what I mean. So it looks very weird now, but you can obviously see the distance, even in these scribbles. Just by how thick the line work is, you can tell this is closer to us and this is farther away. Just how line is the purest form of expression in art, our emotions are our purest form of expression to other people. Unfortunately, despite this being a very critical skill needed to function in society, we are never really taught how to regulate our emotions. At least not in school. Maybe if you had good parents. Maybe. But so many people live their lives repressing their feelings or running around like emotional tornadoes and destroying everything. Learning to identify and process your emotions is an important step to becoming a functioning adult. First, you must be aware of your emotions and how things affect you, i.e., what makes you mad, what makes you happy, what makes you sad. Nowadays, the internet calls these triggers, but start taking note of how you feel throughout the day. Name your emotions when you feel them. When you feel angry, instead of being mad at whatever made you angry, say, I feel angry. Never act while you're in a heightened emotional state. Irrational, erratic behaviors occur when you do this. Learn to sit with your emotions before acting. If you've made it this far, I just want to say thank you so much for listening and for your interest in art. Something I will always advocate for is the arts and their importance to humankind. Nobody asked to be born onto this planet, and we live in hostile times that make everything feel so uncertain. I really miss the time when there was like a mask on society and people had dignity, they had shame, they had manners, things weren't just crazy. You know, you couldn't just go around being a crazy hater, but now you get paid to do that, so it's rough out here. Despite what you may think, we are all the same, and we all deserve to know ourselves and our hearts and reach our full potential. We all deserve to live in a society that supports each other and doesn't prey on weakness. Showing kindness will forever be the biggest strength in an unkind world. Anyways, I hope you learned something today about yourself or about art. Remember to always be taking in the world around you, take care of yourself, and never let anybody kill the whimsy and joy in your heart. Thank you again so much for watching. If you like this video, you can leave it a like down below and subscribe to learn even more about art. If you liked it so much, you'd like to support me further, you can join me over on Patreon. I post behind the scenes and little bit extras over there, and they also get early uploads of all my videos. Thank you so much for learning with me today, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!